The Chevelle SS454 with the LS6 engine versus the 446 pack, two of the most brutal street machines ever unleashed on American asphalt. You've heard the bench racing arguments for decades, but the actual quarter-mile data tells a story that'll make your jaw drop. In 1970, General Motors and Chrysler went to war. Not in boardrooms or dealerships, but on drag strips across America, where horsepower was the only currency that mattered. Chevrolet rolled out their ultimate weapon, the Chevelle SS454 with the legendary LS6 engine. Meanwhile, Chrysler unleashed their triple-carburetor 446 pack in everything from Roadrunners to Cuda. These weren't just muscle cars. These were barely legal street missiles that rewrote the rules of factory performance. The LS6 454 was rated at 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque. Those numbers alone made grown men weak in the knees. But here's what Chevrolet didn't advertise. Their rating system was conservative as hell. Dyno tests from Hot Rod magazine showed the LS6 was actually pushing closer to 500 horsepower at the crank. This wasn't just an engine. It was 454 cubic inches of pure violence wrapped in cast iron. The 446 pack, Chrysler claimed 390 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. Three Holley 2-barrel carburetors sat on top like a mechanical crown, feeding this beast through a progressive linkage that could go from grocery getter to strip killer in a heartbeat. But just like GM, Chrysler was playing games with their numbers. Independent testing showed the 446 pack was easily making 425 to 450 horsepower when properly tuned. Let's talk about what made these engines special beyond just displacement. The LS6 featured solid lifters, forged aluminum pistons, 4 bolt mains, and rectangular port cylinder heads that could flow air like a hurricane. The compression ratio sat at 11.25 to 1. So high that you needed premium fuel just to keep it from detonating itself to death. The cam profile was so aggressive that it loped at idle like a top-fuel dragster warming up. This engine wasn't built for comfort. It was built to dominate. The 446 pack took a different approach. While the LS6 was all about exotic internals and race-bred components, the 440 focused on brute force simplicity with cast pistons and a hydraulic camshaft. A more streetable 10.5 to 1 compression ratio meant you could actually drive this thing to work without fouling spark plugs every morning. But when those 3 carburetors opened up, first the center 2 barrels for cruising, then the outboard carbs for war, you had 1,350 cubic feet per minute of fuel and air, turning your rear tires into smoke machines. The first documented quarter-mile showdown between these titans happened at Detroit Dragway in July 1970. A bone-stock Chevelle SS 454 LS6 lined up against a Plymouth Roadrunner with the 446 pack. Both cars had factory tires, factory exhausts, and factory tune. The temperature was 78 degrees Fahrenheit with low humidity. Perfect conditions for maximum power. When the tree dropped, the Chevelle SS 454 LS6 hooked hard. Those 450 horsepower launched 3,773 pounds of steel, like a rocket sled. First gear was gone in 1.8 seconds. Second gear vanished before you could blink. The speedometer needle swept past 60 miles per hour in just 5.9 seconds. Meanwhile, the Roadrunner was struggling for traction. The 440 massive torque was overwhelming the F70-014 polyglass tires, creating a smoke show that looked spectacular but cost precious tenths. By the 8th mile mark, the Chevelle had pulled 2 full car lengths. The LS6 was screaming at 6,500 revolutions per minute, well into its power band. The 446 pack was catching up, those 3 carburetors dumping fuel like a fire hose. But it was not enough. The Chevelle crossed the quarter mile in 13.42 seconds at 108 miles per hour. The Roadrunner followed at 13.89 seconds at 104 miles per hour. But wait, that was not the whole story. Weight makes a massive difference in drag racing, and not all 446 pack cars were created equal. A month later, at National Trail Raceway, a different matchup changed everything. This time, a 446 pack Dodge Challenger RT faced off against another Chevelle SS 454 LS6. The Challenger was lighter than the Roadrunner by almost 200 pounds, and the driver knew exactly how to launch that 440 without going up in tire smoke. The result shocked everyone watching. The Challenger ripped off a 13.58-second pass at 106 miles per hour, while the Chevelle could only manage 13.71 seconds at 107 miles per hour. Same engines, different outcome. The Mopar crowd went wild. Suddenly, the narrative was not so clear-cut. Car and driver got their hands on both cars for their famous street sweepers comparison in September 1970. Their test, Chevelle SS454 LS6, was a 4-speed car with 3.31 rear gears. The 446-pack test car was a Plymouth Cuda, also with a 4-speed, but running 3.54 rear gears. Professional drivers, a prepped track, and identical weather conditions made this as scientific as street car testing got in 1970. Their results told a familiar story. The Chevelle ran 13.81 seconds at 103.8 miles per hour. The Cuda followed with 13.95 seconds at 102.4 miles per hour. But here is where it gets interesting. The Chevelle was faster through the quarter mile, but the Cuda was quicker to 60 miles per hour by 1/10 of a second. The 440 instant torque gave it the jump, but the LS6 higher rev ceiling and superior breathing allowed it to run down the Mopar in the back half of the track. Motor Trend took a different approach. They grabbed 3 LS6 Chevelles and 3 446-pack cars, a mix of Dodges and Plymouths, and ran them all day long at Orange County International Raceway. After 50 runs between all 6 cars, they averaged the times. The LS6 cars averaged 13.68 seconds at 106.2 miles per hour. The 446-pack cars averaged 13.91 seconds at 104.7 miles per hour. But the spread was tiny. We are talking about 0.2 of a second and 1.5 miles per hour of difference after dozens of runs. What really stood out was consistency. The LS6 times varied by almost half a second between runs, depending on whether that solid lifter camshaft was happy or not. The 446-pack cars stayed within 0.3 of a second all day long. That hydraulic camshaft and lower compression made the 440 more predictable and more repeatable. On the street, that meant you could count on the same performance whether it was a cold Monday morning or a hot Saturday night. Let us talk about the guys who actually raced these cars on the street, where magazine numbers did not mean squat. Tom Hoover, Chrysler chief engineer for the 446-pack program, admitted years later that they specifically tuned the 440 for real-world street racing. "We knew kids were going to race these cars from stoplight to stoplight," he said. The 440 was set up to hook and go on regular street tires with pump gas. Meanwhile, Vince Piggins, who headed up Chevrolet performance operations, had a very different philosophy with the LS6. "We built a race engine that happened to be street legal," he explained. "If you wanted to go fast, really fast, the LS6 was untouchable. But you had to know how to drive it." The real-world difference came down to this. The LS6 was faster when everything was perfect. Fresh spark plugs, good fuel, a warm engine, an experienced driver, and a prepped track. Give it all those conditions, and it would destroy almost anything on 4 wheels. But the 446-pack was faster when everything was not perfect. Cold morning, the 440 fired right up, bad gas. The 440 did not care. Inexperienced driver. The 440 broader power band was far more forgiving. Track records from 1970 and 1971 back this up. At sanctioned NHRA events, LS6 Chevelles dominated the stock classes, taking home more trophies than any other combination. But in street racing, arrests reported in the Hot Rod magazine Arrested Development column, 446-pack cars showed up twice as often as LS6 cars. The Mopar were out there every night, while the Chevelles were far more selective about when they came out to play. Here is something most people do not know. Both engines had secret weapons available through their backdoor racing programs. Chevrolet offered the ZL1 aluminum cylinder heads and intake manifold through their central office production order system. Bolt those parts onto an LS6 and you could drop 75 pounds while adding roughly 30 horsepower. Chrysler had the direct connection program offering the 6-pack to 6-barrel conversion. This setup used NASCAR specification carburetors that flowed a combined 1,500 cubic feet per minute. Both modifications kept the cars technically stock for certain racing classes, while adding serious real-world performance. The craziest verified time for a stock LS6 came from Dick Harrell, personal Chevelle. With nothing more than headers, slicks, and Copo aluminum cylinder heads, he ran 12.84 seconds at 112 miles per hour. That was supercar territory even by modern standards. The quickest documented 446-pack belonged to Ronnie Sock's Plymouth Cuda, which ran 12.91 seconds at 111 miles per hour. With similar modifications, that is a separation of just 0.07 of a second over a full quarter mile, closer than most NASCAR photo finishes. The insurance companies ended this war before anyone could truly see which engine would evolve into the ultimate winner. By 1972, both the LS6 and the high-performance 446-pack were effectively pushed out of production. Insurance premiums became so extreme that dealers could no longer move the cars off showroom floors. A 25-year-old male would often pay more for insurance than the monthly car payment on a Chevelle SS454. The party was over, but the legacy lived on in different ways. The LS6 became the holy grail for Chevrolet collectors. Today, a number-matching LS6 Chevelle can sell for well over $200,000. It is widely considered the pinnacle of General Motors muscle car engineering. The 446-pack, meanwhile, became the working man's big block. You could build one from junkyard parts for a fraction of the cost of an LS6, and it would still run 13-second quarter miles all day long. Go to any local drag strip on a Friday night, and you will see more 440-powered Mopar than almost any other classic combination. Looking back 50 years later, declaring a definitive winner completely misses the point. The LS6 was faster on paper and at the track when conditions were perfect. The 446-pack was faster in the real world, where conditions were almost never perfect. The LS6 was an exotic piece of engineering that pushed the absolute limits of what a production engine could be. The 446-pack was a sledgehammer that delivered brutal performance with Stone Age reliability. Both engines represented the absolute peak of the original muscle car era. Both could launch you down a quarter mile faster than anything else you could buy straight from a showroom. Both created legends that still get bench raced at every car show in America. The real winner was everyone who got to experience these machines when they ruled the streets. Because after 1971, we would never see anything quite like them again. The quarter-mile numbers tell one story. The LS6 was generally 0.2 of a second quicker and 2 miles per hour faster in magazine tests. But the street racing records tell a very different story. The 446-pack won more stoplight drags because it was out there every night, while LS6 owners were often home changing spark plugs. In the end, both engines earned their place in the Hall of Fame. The LS6, for showing us what was mechanically possible. The 446-pack, for showing us what was practical in the real world. And 50 years later, we are still arguing about which one was really faster. That is the truth about the Chevelle SS454 LS6 versus the 446-pack. One goal: total domination of the quarter mile. And honestly, they both succeeded.